do it over to the left. Let's see.
Ungrabbable.
Well, there we go.
I did it.
There you go, Matthias.
You did. You managed.
All right.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Jörg, I suggest we get started. Right? You have the video ready from Jana, right? So welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining. We were very excited that so many of the German crowd was able to come today to this meeting. This is the second meeting of the World Health Network. It started yesterday. We had yesterday already a good bunch of speakers with Nassim Taleb and Eric Feidelding and Cecile Philipp and many more in the opening parts. But today it's more like focused. This session, of course, obviously focused on Germany, but still it should be international because that's the whole idea of the World Health Network, that you connect the world and that you connect the scientists and those people who actually the community want to do some community action. And that's why I'm also very happy that we have a good mix of speakers. We have political scientists. Some of my favorites are here, physicists, and of course medical doctors and people that work on community action. So without further ado, I would say we start the session. We have 2 or 3 talks recorded. Most of them are going to be live right now, right here. And we have to keep it somewhat short, but we decided to cancel a few slots so we have time to discuss later on. So I hope you have fun and feel free to discuss and ask whatever you like. The first speaker is going to be, everybody of you know her very well. She can't be here live, but she recorded her statement and sent it to us. This is Dr. Jana Schroeder, all known to us from TV and papers. Jana is the head of infectious disease and microbiology in a hospital in the west of Germany, and has been very active and also been a part of the World Health Network session earlier this summer. So Jörg, if you're ready, roll the movie.
Thank you very much for having me. So I was asked to talk about what went well concerning a low incidence strategy in Germany. At this point, although I'm definitely not a pessimist, I would rather like to talk about what didn't go well, since at the moment the numbers are rising politically totally unstopped in Germany. As a matter of fact, even some of the last measures that we have are lifted. I think at one point this spring, there was a point where no COVID had reached the brains of some of the political leaders, and I had the feeling some were quite attracted to it. But then came a shift in the public conception about no COVID, that no COVID was equal to long lockdown. I don't quite know how that happened. It was some journalist thing, I think. I have the feeling that since a few months, most everyone has decided on what team they're at. Team careful or team panic inducing, or team opening up and loosening all the restrictions. To me, it seems the longer the pandemic goes, the team opening up gets more followers. Everyone is wary, and a lot are vaccinated, but not enough, and have a feeling it must be enough now. And no one is convincible anymore to switch the teams by anything. And I think that is because the no COVID concept is too complex to just comprehend it with only a short amount of time that you put into it. But if you're willing to think about it for a moment, that's the contrast to just open up everything. It's the concept, but as easy as this finding is, as difficult it is to make something of it, because it lies in the nature of the two strategies that one is just more difficult to understand. More and more I come to the conclusion that everything is said, but not everything is understood. From what I say in public, I almost feel like a broken record, because there are not a lot of new things to say. So I really don't have the answer on what to do next or what would have been better. But I think the public communication of the complexity of no COVID is the key. Thank you very much.
Yeah, this one, yes, okay.
We can move on right away. Is Andrea here, or is this a recording as well, Jörg?
I'm here.
You're here, perfect. So then let me introduce you very quickly. Andrea Schafferhans-Fuhrmann, by training is a PhD in biochemistry, but more representative here as a parent representative with the experience from various kindergartens and schools for over a decade. Andrea, thanks for being here, and the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you. Yes, like Jana, I've been asked to talk about what went well and how to proceed. So I'm going to talk from general citizens and parents' perspective. If you look at how the case numbers changed over time, I think you see that in Germany, the first wave of COVID was actually pretty low. And we really managed to keep the case numbers comparatively low. And I think that was because the spirit in the first wave was very constructive. People didn't expect the authorities to really handle things completely, but they also thought, okay, it's in part to me. So it was also possible to get people to contribute. For example, in a school, we had an effort to produce community masks, and loads of people participated. Or finding computer equipment for students who had to work from home, there also loads of people participated. Then quite a while later, we still had some participation because when the rapid tests were introduced as an option in the schools, as a school board, we gave the parents the opportunity to ask questions and to raise concerns and to think about how to best organize all the testing and to make sure that nobody is stigmatized, etc. Because we included the parents, I have the impression that this still worked well. So my impression is that things that went well with respect to COVID response were things where people had the impression that they could contribute something and were empowered, and where there was self-organization. Something I wanted to mention is that, of course, not only people contributed, but scientists as well. So ours is an example of what we did, but so here I'm talking mainly about people. Okay, so how did it go wrong? I have the impression that after the first wave, the messaging started to become inconsistent. In the first wave, there was no question that we wanted to suppress the number of infections as much as possible, because we thought, okay, it's a new disease and we just don't want to have that. And then when the first wave was over, it was more like, okay, well, but now things have to stop somehow. And with the summer, people also had the impression, okay, now it's up to authorities. They have to make the rules, and if we stick to the rules, then this all should work. So it wasn't a community effort anymore. And once the vaccines have become available, the official statement is that vaccination is the answer to everything. However, in Germany, my impression is that we have very mixed messaging with respect to vaccination, not just for children, where it's really bad, but also for young adults, for example, because the STIKO, the German Commission, emphasizes too much the benefit for the individual, whereas the benefit to the community, and gives the impression that the benefit to the individual is not so big. And my impression is that this has really worked against vaccination. The result of the whole problem is that, for example, in the school my children attend, about 30% of the children under 16 are vaccinated. And of course, because we don't have vaccines yet, none under 12. And another problem is that we don't have tests for vaccinated. So children would be allowed to take part in testing, even if they're vaccinated. But since this is not encouraged, most children don't do it. And the final problem we have in Germany is that even masks are now optional. And again, most students don't actually take them up. And since nobody feels responsible anymore, it's also not that the teachers really encourage students, or that the board encourages students. And the whole result of that is that people are pretty worn out and feeling helpless now. I also try to find out from my peers what are the parents' concerns really, and just to get a reality check, because we as a no COVID movement say, okay, there should be low cases and we need to get to zero. And I wanted to find out what is really the concern of the parents. And this is more around the measures. So a lot of them have a fear of having to go into quarantine, or and the resulting impediments that they can't go shopping, that they can't go to work, things like that. A lot of them have a fear that children might miss out on education, either because being in quarantine or because of schools closing. They have a fear that the children might miss out on life because they can't do sports, go to friends, etc. And they also are afraid that home office options might be taken away, so they don't even have the possibility to take care of their children if those have to go into quarantine. Another problem parents see is that there's a lot of controversy around vaccination, and in schools there has been some stigmatization even of vaccinated students, that there have been fights of, well, I don't like you because you're vaccinated. Could also go the other way around. And finally, if you get to the bottom of the list, some people are also afraid of getting COVID, but that's really not the main concern people seem to have. So what you see is a general passivity. You've got very mixed concerns, and most of the concerns are more related to the state response than to the disease itself. So the question is, how can we restart from here? What can we do to change the whole perception and the messaging? And one thing is that I think we really need to make sure that people get the point that COVID is not in general just harmless. You can't just dismiss it like that, but that's going to be a really hard point to make. And the other thing is to help parents, we should make schools safe and reliable. Even those who are not really afraid of the disease really are looking for reliable schooling. And because of this, there's been the initiative called Team Kinderschutz.de, which focuses mainly on making schools reliable. So I'm showing the website here. Another thing that we could do to help make the schools more safe and reliable is to make sure that people are informed about cases. So in a lot of cases, people don't really know that there was a case in their class or in the form, and we could help people ask their school boards, their headmaster to really inform about the cases. Then it gets more personal, and they see that the numbers that you can see in the news actually relate to them. Another thing you could do is to help people really perceive masks as useful, and also perceive the tests as useful. And I think something that will be really important is to find a way to find vaccination advocates that are believed by the people, because currently, whenever some expert says something about vaccination, that gets dismissed. We need to find peers who really explain why vaccination is a good idea. And the most important thing, I think, would be to establish having low case numbers as a common goal again. But there, I have to admit, I don't know really how to do that. But anyway, I've got the impression that if we show people that they can do something, that they can contribute, not just passive and have to endure everything, then we might be able to get a new movement going, which would be a bit like in the first wave, what I perceived in the first wave. And in order to do so, that's a bigger political picture. It would be really helpful to understand why the disinformation is spread. I mean, what are the interests of people who work against no COVID? I have never understood that, and I think understanding that would really help to act against that. Okay, that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Let's move on right away. As I said, we have a tight schedule and have time to discuss a little later. The next speaker is Dirk Paessler. He's an engineer by training who has spent a lot of free time in trying to do models, and how he justifies doing models to himself, he will tell us about right now. Okay, Dirk, start rendering.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everybody. Being an internet software guy and entrepreneur, let me start my rant by saying that I'm quite honored to be a speaker in this lineup at all. So why do I and many others have to spend our spare time maintaining pandemic data collections and models? In Germany, I see a fundamental disconnection between science and policy. It's combined with a broad lack of understanding of the very basic fundamentals of exponential growth, as well as scientific thinking. I believe that this lack of scientific understanding is the reason that our politicians have failed to empower and promote a trustworthy, independent, well-funded institution that provides reliable, daily updated data and scenario-based model calculations for the near and medium future, and that is respected by politicians and citizens as well for their decisions. Instead, politicians constantly ignore recommendations and data from the Robert Koch Institute, which is killing its trustworthiness. The fact is that I cannot even count the number of occasions when politicians decided exactly the opposite of what should have been decided. For example, easing restrictions while daily infections were already growing. This situation has created a vacuum of publicly available pandemic understanding that has been filled up by amateurs and professionals who publish lots of excellent data on a volunteer basis. Welcome to my Twitter bubble. I've been publishing scenarios of my amateur models since March 2020 and know from the feedback that I have received that a lot of people, including official institutions, Rathäuser, hospitals, and even Gesundheitsämter, rely on my data for their planning of the next weeks because there is no other suitable data source available and accessible for them. I think we can all agree that this is a ridiculous situation. Either the health authorities on various levels of the government do not work with or do not have any models for their scope of responsibility, or they don't share it to the government levels below and the public. Both theories are not worthy of a modern democracy in one of the most developed countries in the world. Now at an outrageous test positive rate of about 12%, which means we are not nearly testing enough. It's almost like we don't want to know what's going on. One must come to the conclusion we are almost intentionally driving blind through this pandemic. No wonder that we again and again keep hearing sentences like, nobody expected this. With my models, I try to provide two views. I try to give my best possible prediction for the next 4 to 6 weeks, and I share scenarios which show the effects of specific changes in behavior and policy over a few months to provide data for decisions. As usual, when working with models, I have published good and bad predictions that turned out to be more or less correct. But at least this data is better than estimating, guessing, or hoping. Look at the left graph. Since June, the actual incidence has always remained inside my 6 weeks prediction range, which is shown in gray. For 2 to 3 weeks in the future, almost all my predictions.
Not sure how I get there. Okay.
Sorry. Okay. For 2 to 3 weeks into the future, almost all my predictions were plus minus 50% correct. The graph on the right shows that my model can quite accurately also predict the number of patients and death, as well as breakthrough infections, always compared with the official data from the Robert Koch Institute. If an amateur can reach this accuracy in his spare time, imagine what a team of professionals working full-time could achieve. But our leadership must want this to happen. My model and also other models predict a massive wave for the already weakened hospitals in Germany in the next 3 to 6 weeks. And again, we are today in the situation that politicians decide the very opposite of what needs to be done. Or they don't decide at all. They refuse to do their job. If the current development goes on unmitigated, we will have more ITS patients in early December than in any other wave before, according to my model, and as well as a few other amateur models. And this number will continue to grow exponentially if we don't quickly make drastic improvements to our restrictions. Our very poor vaccination rate and the waning immunity combined with the high contagiousness of Delta and its mutants make restrictions necessary for this winter period. So my main points are: a massive winter wave is coming. We need to act now. Second, before making decisions, listen to science and models. Ignoring them is stupid. Third, empower and fund professionals to do this so I and all the other volunteers can get back to our other hobbies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dirk. Many of us probably can see themselves in your ranting. Having to justify it with our families day by day, why we spend so much extra time on this. I want to move on. We are still in time. And the next speaker was a very important speaker to me because through the End Corona guys that are hosting this session and Sibylle there, I met Markus Beier pretty much close to Christmas time. And with Markus, we actually then got in touch with all the no COVID guys you know now. So this was kind of the core and the start of the no COVID movement. So Markus, I'm very happy you're here, and as always excited and curious what you have to say. Stage is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Because of the situation, I was not able to make slides, but I think I can make some points with you in discussion. Yes, I'm a family doctor in Germany, and I'm this president of the GP organization in Bavaria and vice president of the GP organization in Germany. And yeah, to look back, what was good, what was bad, what will we have to improve? I think when we started, Matthias, we were in a quite similar situation than now, and I think what we reached was the same process and discussion we have now to let the pandemic flow over the country. We stopped in last winter. We were not happy in looking back that we were not able to get the politicians for a no COVID and low incidence strategy. But we reached to make a discussion point in a few cases to stop the pandemic situation, and I don't know if we will reach this now. I think we should try, and so we have a lot of improvement in the vaccination campaign, in the testing strategies, and so on. We reached a lot of small points in the German system, but we reached not the goal to have a strategy that will focus on what is necessary. And we now see what's happening if you live with the virus. It means you die with the virus. The ambulance system in which I work, we managed in the last 12 months about 30 million suspect cases, because in the ambulance system, every running nose, every headache is until I know it's not Corona, it's Corona. Though we have to work under great pressure. It's not that heroic ICU unit, but it's a lot of patients, people that are full of fear and so on. And the problem in the discussion at the moment and in the past was that there's no clear side on what is the pandemic and what is caused by the tragedies. So a lot of things are connected with helpful measurements and not to the pandemic. And now a lot of people see the pandemic is more worse than what we had in a lockdown situation. So that's one problem. And main problem, on the other hand, is that there's no real authentic communication. It's all about public communication. It's all about talking about evidence in a single case or evidence in looking back. We have no real connection to what means evidence in a pandemic situation. That's, I think, a big problem. And a big problem in the medical system is we have a very tight side on individual person problem. That's important. It's part of our German history that the individual situation, it's more higher than the situation of the community. But in a pandemic situation, we are not that able to shift and connect to build a bridge between an individual human medicine to public health measures. So that's my favorite thing that we have to discuss on and have to work on, is connect the individual medicine side on persons, on humans with the public health situation. There is a lot to do, and that's one of my favorite points for the future to discuss with you. So that's the situation for the moment.
Excellent. We are good in time, so technically we could have a question every now and then, but I prefer to keep the time and have an open discussion for everybody at the end instead of like pick single questions here and there. Okay, thanks, Markus. And we continue with another Markus. Markus Ewald. He's a crisis manager and a political consultant. And we have a statement of him right now. Is this a recording or is Markus here? There you go. Okay,
Markus is here.
Stage is yours. Sharon, can you move Markus? Can you move Markus up?
Yes, happy to.
Thank you. All right, I'm starting to talk. I'm not sure how the software works, but I assume it works. So I'm a crisis manager, very correctly. And as a crisis manager, we have multiple clients of all industries. And obviously, they were curious how this Corona thing would play out. And we consulted them on it. And we also consulted parts of the government, on the municipal level, up to the actual government. I was having some phone chats with Mr. Brown, for example, who was leading the Kanzleramt. And to my disappointment, nothing really happened the way it should have in the perspective of crisis management, which is the reason why in February 2021, I started Twittering to help in understanding what a crisis situation could be or become. And one of the things that I realized in my work with entrepreneurs, but also with the politicians, is that they missed meeting people, obviously, and they were missing the perspective of the people. They just heard the ones that were loud, which were the ones who were still in open gatherings, demonstrations, whereas all the people who would be pro ending Corona would obviously not go on public demonstrations. And this is why I use Twitter as a tool to connect with other like-minded people and to help organize some forms of protest which are visible and audible to politicians in order to inform decisions. While we achieved some successes in terms of being audible and in terms of being visible, we did not achieve basically anything in terms of helping inform better decisions. That was also pretty sad for me, although I think we managed at least to help organize people and to help organize people behind a common goal, which was good. What I firmly believe now, after 18 months of pandemic management, visiting from the inside and outside, is that we cannot predict the virus. It is more or less unpredictable in the long term and medium terms, and it is very predictable in the short term, as Dirk Paessler has demonstrated just now. And we need to make sure that this unpredictability of the virus does not translate to an unpredictability of our reactions to it. And this is what was, I think, the worst part for many of us. The unpredictability if we could get our children to school next week or next month. The unpredictability for businesses. Are they open or are they not? The unpredictability of how politicians would come to a decision when presented with information, if at all. And this unpredictability of a political process is, I think, the starting point for an even bigger crisis if we do not tackle it. And because if anything, the German state promises stability. And while it tries to maintain stability by not reacting to stimuli, this exactly leads to instability. Unfortunately, this is not very much understood in the public realm. It's not understood in the political realm. And we try to inform and help out where we could. What I think, sadly, very, very sadly, is what Andrea has said is completely true. There is a huge fatigue because people wouldn't know what goal to rally behind, and there is no one rallying them behind it. And this means that we basically, as a society, are waiting for a goal to appear from nowhere to rally behind. And so far, I mean, first wave, we tried out lockdown. Second wave, we tried out mitigation lockdown. This wave, we seem to be trying out let it rip through. I currently have the impression that we need to wait out until that has proven to be wrong, to basically use the next cycle to achieve something better. And in terms of crisis management, this would be the preparation of a so-called latent strategy. That is to have a framework, have tools ready when society has accepted that none of these three strategies have worked so far. I don't, unfortunately, I'm not happy about this, but I don't see any faster movement or faster way to basically presenting those alternatives, which is why I think organizations like this one here and meetings like this one here are very important if we understand that we need to be prepared for a moment that we are still waiting for. And we unfortunately cannot force this moment. This is sad, but like the Portuguese vice admiral of submarines said, if you are a submarine, you're slower and you don't have much firepower. So you need to lay still and wait to be there where the enemy will be in the future. And I guess this, from the strategic point of view, is what this movement here has as a task as of now.
Thank you, Markus. Yeah. Excellent. I guess the next one is a recording, though. Is that right? From Professor Thomas Martens. He's a psychologist, and in his video statement that he sent to us, he will talk about a vaccination campaign. Jörg? Excellent.
Hello together. My name is Thomas Martens. I'm professor for educational psychology at Medical School Hamburg in Germany, and I will present you an action-oriented vaccination campaign that is built on theoretical considerations as well as prior research in motivation. Yeah, let's start with the actual situation. I think the actual situation, at least in Germany, is that people have a lot of fears concerning the vaccinations, receive inconsistent information, and are under peer pressure to vaccinate or not to vaccinate. And it's all about getting the right information. But how do we want to tailor this information? But let me start first with that it's really important that people have a free choice to vaccinate or not to vaccinate. I think pressure or force is not the right way to do so. This will have serious consequences, and I think it will backfire if we force people to vaccinate. So we really have to convince the people. And how do we do this? I think we should keep in mind that persons have different psychological needs, are in different situations, and we need these situations, this information to tailor risk information, action information, realization information, and feedback information. And with these information, the people should come to an informed action regulation, or at least to an informed decision. And I will base these different kind of information on the integrated model of learning in action. And this is a model how people enact, for example, their vaccination process. And from an action point of view, we can distinguish 3 phases. We can identify the motivation phase, where the motivation starts. I take risks into accounts, benefits into accounts, and I will take responsibility for this motivation. In the intention phase, I will think, how can I enact this motivation? Which are the right actions to take? Which are the benefits of specific action? And in the volition phase, I will take this into action. I will implement these intentions that I built in the intention phase. And for each of these action steps, I need specific information, and I will present them. So, at first, I need risk information. I need information about my personal disease risks. I will need information about side effects, about risky situation, and about acceptance of responsibility. So if I don't need to protect myself, maybe I need to protect people that are near to me or people who I work with. I need action information. So the action itself, it's very simple. You get the vaccination shot, but of course, from an action theoretical framework, there could be different possible protective action. I can outweigh wearing, for example, a mask against vaccination, or I can do both. And one important thought in this action information phase is the free choice. So the trick is to give people free choices in their actions. I mean, we don't have a lot of free choices in this case, but at least the people should choose their vaccination type. They should choose their time intervals, and they should be informed about short and long-term effects of vaccinations, and of course about behavior directly after vaccination. And then they should be given realization information. And of course, the best way to do this would be to lower barriers to action, to give them very specific information how to vaccinate. For example, give them an exact appointment in time for a specific location. So to keep the barriers to action as low as possible. You can combine these low barriers with other measures like social support. You can involve relatives for supporting their elderlies. You can use intention implementations that people should choose and vaccination time right after the information and so on. So yeah, really try to support this action implementation. And last but not least, the feedback information. After the feedback, people should be informed about personal and general outcomes, and personal outcomes should include level, for example, level of antigen titers, so that they will get an information if the vaccination was successful, as well as general outcomes for the population you are living in. And of course, you can have some visibility for these vaccinations, like signs or celebration, also to really have a feedback loop that the people feel that they did something good with this decision to vaccinate. We have another layer that we have to keep in mind for these vaccination campaign, and we can distinguish between general information that is given to all people, like in the news or in the newspaper. You can give tailored information, targeting specific subpopulation and giving them specific information that fits their personal needs. Maybe, you can give specific information for elderly that they need to booster to keep their immune status with a low risk. And the third layer will be personal information. And this has a lot to do with trust. I think a lot of people nowadays need someone they can trust, and someone which can help them with their decision and give them this specific information they need. And this personal information could be given by relative, but I think more important would be the family doctor who knows the patients, who knows the personal needs, and who can really provide detailed information and personal information about vaccination. And at least in Germany, I think these information providing from the family doctors should be reimbursed much more than it's nowadays possible. The big question is, who can be reached by such an information campaign? And I identified different types of the unvaccinated before. I cannot go into deeper details about this right now, but to give you an overview, I made this matrix, and you see on the left side the different information type, the risk information, the intention information, the realization information, and the feedback information. On the top, the different layers like general information, tailored information, and personal information. And you see that the majority of the unvaccinated is reached by personal information. So the family doctors will have an important role, and a very important role, in this kind of information campaign. If we would roll out such an information campaign, this should be empirically embedded, and of course we should collecting data about these campaign, evaluate this campaign and reshape this campaign if we see that some parts are not working well. Then we need to redesign some parts of the information campaign, and yeah, but this should be then an ongoing process. So thank you for listening. Here's just a quick overview about sources I needed for this information campaign. And if you want to contact me, you can send me an email. Thank you for listening. Bye.
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to mention just one thing before we continue. You can already post questions in the chat if you want for the discussion that will start in a little while. But now we come to the real core no COVID group session. So it's a great honor, and I'm delighted that so many of the group, Markus, including Markus, showed up and are here now, actually live and in color. The first speaker is Dirk Brockmann from the Humboldt University in Berlin.
Oh, it's my turn. Good. Can you guys hear me? Give me a sign. Excellent.
Yes.
I'm gonna share my screen. Hold on for a second. There. Need to find it. Just 1 second. It's a little sluggish here. Okay, got it.
Right. I don't think you need.
What were you saying, Matthias?
I just wanted to say that you were one of the core members of the No COVID group, where you explained us everything about networks and mobility that I ever wanted to know. Thank you very much, Dirk.
Right. So thanks. So you guys can hear me. First, it's a pleasure to talk to you in this setting. You can see the screen. One word about who I am. I'm a professor at Humboldt University, and I have a group of people at the Robert Koch Institute, and my background is modeling infectious diseases. And it's been the curse of this pandemic that in Germany, people have been identifying me and my group with the modeling activities that were taking place at the Robert Koch Institute, but which we were actually doing a number of other things at the Robert Koch Institute, which I want to present some here, that are more concerned about assessing the situation and using digital tools to do that. And I think this is very important for getting a better picture of what's going on a much faster scale. One of the challenges in the past has been that during the pandemic, especially during the first year, there was always discussions about, what is the incidence, what are the numbers, etc. What kind of numbers should we feed into the models, etc. And time is very crucial. One of the elements of the no COVID strategy was acting fast and quickly, and not postpone reactions to the current situations by unnecessary time lag. So one of the things that I also think could be embedded in the World Health Network is citizen science. And we started a project right at the beginning of the pandemic that was called the Data Donation Project in Germany. And in my view, this helped us to some extent to understand what's going on in the pandemic. So I'm going to go through this a little bit and introduce to you this project and explain to you how it helped and how I think this should be rolled out on an international scale outside of the companies that do that anyway. I'll come to that in a second, and outside of governments. So the Data Donation Project is the basic idea was that people donated data that was collected by wearable devices like smartwatches and fitness tracking devices, physiological data like daily heart rate and activity and sleep, because based on an idea published a while back, you can read off whether a person has a fever symptom from this data with a fairly high reliability because of changes of heart rate with respect to a person's baseline. And so we launched this, and it was a citizen science project. So voluntarily, people donated this data every day, all of those people that had a smartwatch. And we had from the beginning about 500,000 donors in Germany, given that data security and data security awareness in the population is very, very sensitive. That's a very high number. And so of these people, we were able to detect deviations like you see here in the heart rate, a raised heart rate and a drop in activity, and identified this with fever symptoms. And you cannot do this on an individual basis with high reliability, but on a population basis, deviations from the baseline mean something is going on. And in fact, since a while back, this is now part of the nowcasting system that we use. That is a sort of short-term prediction that is updated every day and is quite reliable. But I want to kind of explain why this is more important. Not only why the range of application is much wider than just doing nowcast. In this kind of situation. One of the things that we recently found is shown here in this slide, and it's quite worrisome because the people that wear these devices are usually quite healthy and younger, but we see you see this on the top right. That's the red curve is the deviation, the heart rate, the daily heart rate of a person that got infected where the black line is. Or that got positively tested where the black line is. And you can see quite long-term deviations from the baseline, which is the blue line that lasts between 40 and 120 days. The same is true for sleep and activity. So even among this group of people that are quite healthy, there are long-term effects over 3 months and more. To these physiological time series. So that's quite worrisome. And, it's a question that addresses long COVID. And we just wanted to supply some evidence because that discussion is just quite annoying how it's going on. But there are a number of things that are not in the data donation, but I think they should be in there. And I think they could be if this is rolled out in a different way. One of the things that we also analyzed is, and that's part of the thing that is not in the donation project, but it's part of the mobility, it's part of the contact monitoring. I'm going to show you a trace of measurements of about 1 million people, of which we have the GPS location as a function of time and their contacts. And you can see as a function of time that relates to some of the things that Markus said. I think that even before government measures are taken, people react to the pandemic and quite quickly. That you can see that in the first wave during the first lockdown. If you look at the upper trace, I apologize for the German labeling because it was made for a German audience. Right before the first lockdown, people reduced contacts already massively. And then it went up and down, and you can see that now in the winter, if you focus between July, the summer, and October, it increased again. It didn't become normal again, but there is an increase. And you can see these gray lines. Those are like weekend activities. And what's particularly worrisome is the variation of contacts. You see this on the bottom line. This means that people meet now more variably. So they, every now and then they meet 1 or 2 people a day, but then they go on the weekend to meet lots and lots of people, which is puts a lot of force of infection on this entire event. But we don't have this kind of information about contacts, and it could be part of a worldwide data donation project that is managed in a distributed and non-centralized way in order to understand this. Because at the end of the day, we don't understand this thing because we don't understand contact networks. And another element of data, we collected this on the mobility project. I'm just going to show you a picture of how mobility was affected during the pandemic with respect to normal mobility. This is a picture of Germany. The mobility network on the left is the usual network, and on the right, it's during lockdown. And so these effects are massive, and they need to be quantified, and they, of course, need to be incorporated in quantitative models of disease dynamics. But it's more important to look at this data in order to understand how the community, how the population responds to either policies or the pandemic itself. And it's quite intriguing how this works. So it's not only policies people react to, but it's actually the neighborhood information in the social network and news. And so one of the things this is why I think this is the World Health Network is the right audience for this, is because the issue with this sort of all of these projects and data donation in general is that people don't trust Google, Facebook, etc., and these companies for good reasons. These companies, I said comedies, I think companies, and these companies collect this data. So if you're a government, you may collect this data, and at the Robert Koch Institute, we are a government agency, and we collect this data, but people don't trust the government either, also for good reasons. So my dream about this, maybe it could be realized in the next pandemic, that we have something like the World Health Network, something decentralized, something that is neither government nor a big profit-oriented companies that can build something like this, where people are willing to do this, because the data is so valuable, so massively valuable to understand the situation, that it's really worthwhile doing it. And on that note, I'm going to end this presentation that I was going to show last night, but it didn't happen. So thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Dirk. And we have to continue talking about this.
Yeah.
And,
what button do I press? This one, I guess.
I don't think you there you go. He's gone. Excellent. We move on. It's my great pleasure to have Michael Meyer-Hermann here as well. Sharon will, I think, move you up, Michael, any second. You can already start sharing your screen if you want to. You have something you want to share there. Well, Michael, I don't need to really introduce. He is one of the probably most prominent, at least among the physicists, during this whole pandemics. I sometimes call in Germany's crystal ball, because his predictions for at least for the next 6 to 8 weeks were almost pretty much right on, and it was my great pleasure to work with him in the No COVID group. And I'm very happy that you're here now, Michael. Stage is yours.
Thank you, Matthias, for having me here. So what I would like to say is actually a few things about what happened in Germany. And one thing that I think is really important, and was also mentioned by Dirk right a second ago, is the speed of response. So that's actually a thing that was a big role for modeling. So we do predictions, and we can tell what will happen in the next 6 to 8 weeks, as you say. Probably we are more or less right with this. And this information could be used in order to be faster and faster than virus. But what was happening is that many politicians were listening to those models and then taking the decisions when the predictions were coming true. So this is somehow losing the advantage of the modeling, and was a kind of frustrating element of the whole pandemic mitigation process. The other thing that came up during the pandemic fight was the discussion that there is a contradiction between the interests of economy and health. So this is something that is actually not true. And Cecile covered that yesterday. So I have a corresponding work on this that's published together with the IFO Institute, where we show that actually the health and economy have the same interest, and that the economy is better off in the end when they follow a low incidence strategy. But as Cecile Philippe was talking about this yesterday, I think, or earlier in the conference, I will not talk about that, but I will talk about another problem. And the problem that I would like to focus on is the no COVID strategy and why it was not so much accepted in Germany. So there was a main argument. The main argument was Germany is not an island as Australia, and also there is lots of people traveling between different regions of Germany. And so what we did in order to contribute to that discussion is to do a mathematical model and to simulate exactly this traveling within Germany, and to see whether the no-COVID strategy is still feasible in such travel. So we have for every county, which is a node on the right-hand side, every county we have an own model that is about the infection dynamics within the county. And then we have people traveling between the counties. Mostly this, we were taking data from commuters between the different counties. And for each of those counties, we have a model that is shown on the left. So it's a very simplified version of something that we published in a more complex way in the BMC medicine down there. And so we used those models in an aged resolved way. So now we have space resolution because the model is for every county, and we have age resolution because we have different age classes. And so if we do so, I have to say a little bit what we do about the commuters. So people can now move from one county to the next. And if they do so, we can combine that with commuter testing. So testing commuters before they actually go to the other side, to the other county. So this is what we implemented, and we have the different states, and the results of those tests are then preventing the people to travel. So if we do so, we can now distinguish different scenarios. One is about the lockdown strictness, so it's how you reduce contacts. This is done in an incidence-dependent way. So if we go with an incidence above 100, there is a reaction and we increase the measures. This can happen with delay that you can see on the right-hand side. So either 1 week delay or 3 weeks delay. So this is the delay of the political decision. And we can do the commuter testing with different frequency. So let's see what happened. We can play with all these parameters, and we did so, but I will just show you a few results that make sense maybe. So we start here from the map of Germany, where the color is coding the current incidence. It's a random distribution of incidences that we use here. And then we take a very strict version, so strong measures, 5 times testing of commuters, and also 5 times a week, so every day basically, and a fast reaction to increasing incidences. And what you can see is that the red parts on the left-hand graph are now turning orange, yellowish, but what is more important, the green parts stay green. And so it means that we were able to protect the green zones with those measures, rather than to, in comparison, if you have a longer delay and test only twice a week, a little bit less of measures. So the red parts are a little bit mitigated, so the originally red parts. But what is more important is that the green parts turn orange. So we now get into the situation on conflagration and lose the control of the pandemic, which means in the end that we will have to do global measures on the whole country rather than to do local measures as we do with a no-COVID strategy. So what that very simply tells you is the no-COVID strategy works. If you have computers, it will not prevent it to work, but it will require additional testing. So we need the testing of the people who are walking, traveling between the different counties. And the other thing that turned out relevant in this particular setting is that the political decisions are happening very quickly. So the goal here is preventing global measures, and this is the main advantage of low incidence strategies. So I would like to thank the German Aerospace Center with whom we did this modeling, and the no-COVID expert group, who is basically here in the discussion. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Yeah, we had a discussion yesterday about if the science is so clear, what the hell is going on in the world? And I keep asking myself this question. Well, the last two speakers are from the political science field. My two favorite political scientists in Germany. And the first one is going to be Maximilian. I think you are here, Max, right? Can you hear me? Max? There you go. Excellent. Well, there you go. I cannot hear you
I
yet.
hope you can hear me.
Yes, now I can hear you. So Max is
Now can you hear me?
Yes. Oh. He's a professor for political science in the University of Bonn, and he will talk about a need of a different framework for future pandemic preparedness. Max, thank you very much for coming. Great to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, and thanks for organizing that meeting. I'm glad to share a couple of thoughts. I think I can't share my screen for some reason, so I just do some talking. What I want to say is like three quick points. You could say maybe three issues related to actions or ideas how to move forward. The first point is a more long-term perspective. Since I'm involved in on various levels to think through the lessons of this pandemic and how we can prepare for a next one, I think there's really important work to be done, but that's really long-term. So perhaps three key points about that. I think for Europe and Germany to become better prepared for the next pandemic, which is surely coming, we need to learn from the success stories, and it's especially from countries in East Asia and Asia Pacific. And a lot of these things, I think we try to condense and to bring together under the label of no COVID has been done better and more systematically, and without too much waiting. So there's a lot of things to be learned. I think a second important point is, especially the rich countries, including Germany, we need to invest a lot of money into building a global infrastructure for vaccination, which can be put to work immediately when we realize there's a next pandemic coming or there's a next pandemic unfolding. And then based on the new types of vaccines, we should be able to roll that out. And we are not building that. We're not doing that. I mean, we're just donating some vaccines, and that's all what we're doing. So that there needs to be an infrastructure globally, including production sites in other places. And a third point, I think, which is very important, Dirk has already mentioned that we need different kinds of models. We need policy models which are able to show alternative political options for the public and policymakers. And all of that is a long-term sort of project. It requires cultural changes of the ways how we communicate scientific results and ways how we use models to envision different futures. I think this is relevant not just for pandemic, it's also relevant, for example, for the energy transition and other big changes which will affect society and which will always include different political and technical options. Second point is about people's power. I have observed as a political scientist with great interest that it was possible for some groups to achieve their goals, especially, for example, abandoning masks and other things in schools. How did they do that? It's actually very simple. They used the principle of concentrating power and concentrating action at small points or persons by sending out in a concerted way letters, emails, phone calls, and so forth, directed at certain decision makers. And that changed something. And I wonder why the no-COVID camp, so to say, hasn't done that. Why weren't we able to concentrate our actions to use the principle of power concentration to make at least small-term, immediate changes, such as intervening in the discourse and not allowing for the federal states to abandon masks in schools and other measures. And then a last point, and that's perhaps a bit more midterm, it's about mourning the victims of COVID-19. I've started to compare a little bit the ways in which in different countries around the world the massive death toll and the massive numbers of victims is actually memorized, whether there are memorials, whether people are putting out in public sites or on the private estates or wherever sites to mourn. And it's quite stunning that Germany doesn't even have a discussion on that. So we're not discussing in any way how we mourn them, almost 100,000 people, many of them dying totally without a need and dying because we made big policy mistakes. Other countries have started doing that, including in India, in the US, but also in Indonesia. And for me, the mourning is not just something on a personal level. I think it's also on a collective level. It's a power political move, basically. It's another way to struggle against the decisions taken on the government level. So it's highly political to build memorials and to start memorizing publicly. And it's also another way to show that we are not accepting the normalization of further COVID-19 deaths as something normal, at least until the infection is really endemic, in the sense that that this word makes in any way meaningful for public health policy. So in 3 points, I think for pandemic preparation, we need long-term learning and systemic changes, which are pretty hard to achieve and which need long-term sustained efforts. But in the short term, we have people's power, we have the power of concentration, we're not making enough use of that. And in the midterm, I think we need really to engage in the politics of mourning and build up memorial sites as a symbol against the insane policies which are right now seem to be common sense among policymakers and people responsible at different governmental levels. Thanks for attention.
Thank you, Maximilian. Thank you very much. And we come to the last speaker. It's my great pleasure to have Elvira Rosert here, also political scientist, also in the no-COVID group from the University of Hamburg, and the only one besides Markus that I met in person so far. Elvira, stage is yours.
Yes, hello everyone. So also I want to thank you for having me here, and it's a great pleasure to share some thoughts, and most of these thoughts kind of relate to our role so far as scientists and as citizens in this pandemic. I'm going to share some slides. I'm sorry they're so ugly. I just didn't have the time for a layout, but I think they will support what I'm going to talk about.
You know how the upper right.
Where can I find my slides?
The upper right.
I found the share button.
Oh, you did?
Yes, but never mind. So slides are ugly anyway, and I can't find them right now. So I just found the share button, but not my my screen. So I will just talk about what maybe for a global campaign towards elimination is needed. So first of
Thank
all,
you.
I think it's a huge challenge to initiate some kind of change on strategy at this point. It's so huge that it's maybe even impossible because the degree of change is really big for most governments on this planet, actually. It would be, so going for elimination would mean a radical reverse of the course for most countries. And it means it includes both the attitude towards the virus, meaning that the narrative that we have to live with the virus, which has been really dominant and sticks with really many decision makers and also with many people in the population, needs to be changed. And the second challenge is not just the attitude, but not just the attitude towards the virus, but the acceptance that measures still need to be taken, and not just for now and for the next couple of months, but maybe even for years. So I think it's really difficult what needs to be accomplished in terms of this attitude change. If I look at the situation, so some points you've heard about already from Jana, but also from Andrea. I think the conditions for change at the same time are really unfavorable after almost 2 years of the pandemic. So first of all, we see a widespread exhaustion and demoralization among the people. Andrea already spoke about that people are war off right now. So yes, and also the policymakers are exhausted and demoralized. And I think this partly explains while at least in Germany we have the perception that no one cares anymore about this pandemic. Then also we have gridlocked positions. Many people, in particular those who had a position towards the pandemic because they were in a position to make some decisions, have said a lot of things and they have done a lot of things. So they will face consistency pressure if they're change their position now. And we also have many gridlocked narratives that would need to be changed as a prerequisite for policy change. At the same time, when we look at the populations, we have many vaccinated people who have been compliant with the rules for a long time and who feel they've just done their share, and they are not willing to accept any restrictions anymore. And this means that acceptance for any kinds of measures, even very low threshold measures such as masking and testing, will be even more difficult to elicit than before, in particular because the individual risk has minimized by a lot for so many. And also the trust into the government has decreased tremendously because promises over promises that the thing will end soon have been made, and herd immunity has been promised through vaccination, and also somehow it has been implied that the stage of endemicity that we are aiming for will be acceptable, which probably won't be the case. Those hopes that many people have been clinging on need to be taken first before any kind of a new strategy can be applied in most countries, actually. So my perspective for change is quite pessimistic. I'm not sure that the change toward elimination or a COVID strategy is possible at all anymore. I think it has been in the past, but this window of opportunity may have passed already. And to achieve this, the pressure on decision makers needs to be enormous. It needs to grow to a level that is unprecedented yet. And so far, there's not a lot of pressure at all on them to act. I still think it is worth being advocated for. So what we are doing here is not futile. So I still think we can try to do something. So I wondered, so what is it that actually could be done? When I look at it, or when I would analyze our cause as someone who has not been involved in it, but just as a political scientist who's working on transnational campaigns on contentious issues, the big thing that I see here is that the advocacy has been way too limited to academics throughout this whole pandemic. So if you look at the people who have been advocated for sustainable containment, for elimination, in almost every country, these were scientists, be it Germany, UK, or also the US. And this advocacy has been very limited to scientists, and actually this is unusual. In other fields, such as arms control, which is my research field, usually we have a coalition of organized civil society and scientific advocacy. And here I observe a very puzzling advocacy vacuum by the civil society. I haven't seen any big civil society players from the humanitarian field, such as the ICRC or the Médecins Sans Frontières or CARE International, pushing for a different strategy when dealing with the coronavirus. Of course, there is no such big health advocacy organization like Amnesty International, for example, and the smaller advocacy organizations did not speak up on this very big strategic levels, but rather cared for sub-issues. So there has been no pressure from civil society on the governments to do something different, except from scientific groups like ours, or from individual citizens groups, which just don't have the power, and we don't have the resources and also not the right instruments, I think, for such a big advocacy campaign. So my conclusion would be that the coalition pushing for elimination needs to be diversified. What we need is a true global campaign, which can't be a purely academic campaign supported by individual citizens or citizens coalitions. But we need to get the non-academic civil society to work with us and to get involved into this cause, which means that we need the big humanitarian players and in particular the gatekeepers among them, like Amnesty International or the ICRC or even Human Rights Watch, because of course we are dealing with human rights issues here. So it needs to become a classical campaign, which is run by professional campaigners and involves a coalition of academics and humanitarian and human rights non-governmental organizations, in particular because the repertoire that they can use to advocate for certain causes is much bigger than ours. I think it doesn't just apply to me, but as an academic at the university position, most of us face some kind of institutional restrictions, but also how our public role is defined and what is expected from us and what is rather not expected from us is advocacy. It's not drama, it's not emotions. And I think we need people who are doing this part of the job and doing it better than we can. So this is actually the only chance that I see to create the necessary pressure and to mobilize the populations on a scale that hasn't happened so far in this pandemic. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Elvira. Thank you all for being here. I have to apologize for Dirk Brockman. He had to leave already, so he says hi and happy to collect some questions and forward them to him. So has Markus. They already had some obligations, so but everybody else is here. So we have some time left for discussions. Vincent wrote some questions in the chat. Vincent, if you're around, you may as well ask yourself the questions. Vincent, can you go? Yes, here you are. So Vincent.
Hi there. Yeah, thanks everybody. I'm really interested in the next steps. So especially when I liked very much the metaphor of the submarine from Markus Ewald. So for me, what's a direct question to him? So how is the situation for us? Like, what is our submarine waiting for, and what is it gonna do then? Especially after what Elvira just said, and you know the pressure becoming even less so after the kids are vaccinated. So would that be another variant, or what are you thinking of, and how could we help in the process?
Markus? Are you still here? Is Markus still here? I don't see him. Oops. Somebody else wants to take that question, or if not, Vincent, you had also the question from Elvira, if I'm right?
Yeah, maybe Elvira wants to say something to that. I don't know. You said we could do a campaign already now, or is that also something that would need to wait for a specific thing to happen?
How do we proceed? Should I just answer, or do we have a speakers list?
No, go ahead. Just go ahead.
Thanks, Vincent, for your question. I think it's really good. So what is the next thing we are waiting for? It also relates to Markus Ewald's input, who said that we might first try out this strategy and learn that it hasn't worked out. My honest impression is that very little learning has occurred despite all the bad things that happen. So kind of waiting for even worse things to happen, hoping that then something will change. It's not only cynical, but I understand if we become cynical at this point, but I just don't think we need such a natural thing to happen. I'm not sure that the power would be enough to get people to think about maybe that they can do something different. So I think what is needed is actually rather a social factor. And yes, so the campaign I've been speaking about, I don't think it's us. I think at least not us as the group of scientists that has provided the expertise and has provided the plan to get over this pandemic. I don't think advocacy is our role, and I also think that it already has diminished some kind of credibility that we had and authority. I really think we need other actors to take over and to work with us and to do some part of the jobs that we can't do.
Thanks.
Yeah, we discussed yesterday that if you're facing a major crisis, that the only real way to compel the decision makers to act is actually the community activity. That needs to be, of course, it needs to be an informed community or a scientifically guided community, but it can't be the scientists itself that do it. I think that's citing Noam Chomsky partially, to admit. I have a question. Is Michael still there? Yes, Michael Meyer-Hermann. I have a question. It's not directly to your work. It's more the puzzling part that I have, Michael, is you mentioned Cecile, and we know what Stephen Duckett or what the Australian guys are doing. It feels to me all come to the same conclusion. Do you know of any colleagues in your field? I mean, you're working internationally. You're reading not just papers from Germans. Do you know anybody who comes to completely different conclusions of how to tackle a pandemic best for science, for health and economy? Or are you puzzled as much as I am that the science is so clear? Why is it not done?
I agree with you that actually, scientifically speaking, there is no alternative. And the problem why actually such slides as I was showing them to you is not convincing political decision makers is that there is other arguments in the society that are also valid and that compete with those goals, even though only few understand that the low incidence strategy is helping on all levels. And this is something that not everyone is convinced of. And I think a basic problem of convincing decision makers is exactly there, that it is not clear whether or not it will be beneficial or harming other areas of the society.
But as a scientist, do you have colleagues like physicists or people that are in modeling as well that come to completely different conclusions based on their models?
I don't know of any. Well, there is colleagues, but, it depends on how you define colleagues. Yeah, there is certainly a certain level of non-professionals, and I got a lot of hobby modelers who were thinking that they can contribute to the whole thing with some models. And so they came to whatever conclusion you want. So there is a certain diversity there, but let's say the people who have an education in the field, they are all speaking with the same voice.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Any further questions? People? Comments? Anybody? Yeah. All right. Okay, then I just want to thank everybody again. We have the closing session at it's at 7 our time. Is that correct, Jörg? Can you confirm? Jörg? 7. The closing remarks are from Janir at 7.
7:05.
Okay, 7:05. And what room would that be?
I don't know, public hall or whatever.
Yeah, okay. Go to main hall and then you can find it. I want to thank you all, and if you are interested in the World Health Network to join or to be affiliated or to be invited to the next summit or whatever, any form of shape, we are happy to have anybody of you, of course, being involved, taking part in the next summit that will it's not decided yet, but it will happen at some point in time, because this is unfortunately not over. And plus, I also wanted to mention that the World Health Network is not limited, or it's not planning to limit itself to COVID-19. So we certainly are also already thinking ahead in other crisis. Is it the climate or antibiotics and things like that are discussed as well with our colleagues from all over the world. All right, and also feel free, of course, to get information from us or get connected. I mean, it's a network, hence the name. Okay, thank you everybody for being here. Good luck. Don't give up. Keep in touch, and hopefully I see you at the closing remarks for with Janir at 7:05. And thanks the whole Corona crisis and Corona crew from Germany that actually have put all this together. I'm just being put here as the chair.
I'm audible now?
I can hear somebody.
Okay. Yeah, no, I just wanted to make like a very small remark, like from, so to speak, from the non-scientific side, from part of the Zero COVID campaign in Germany. And well, and we also have a lot of, I don't know, resignation. And I just want to emphasize that I still think that there are really things also from the scientific side which are like not on the table in public, also like considering the more middle term perspective. Questions like what does it actually mean of this virus getting endemic? It's that might actually be a thing we want to have, or wouldn't it be better not to have this? This is not widely discussed. This is not not widely known. And also, yes, like the political situation now is not like that we could, and the political and the Delta variant situation right now are not like that we could like aim at elimination, but and so there's also a lot of resignation even among those who would have campaigned for elimination, but now see that there's no political momentum. And they also ask themselves, what is the more long-term perspective? And there we can also argue they might get better vaccines. What is the situation with booster vaccines and so on? And also because of this long-term perspective, to make it a good perspective, we still need like a low incidence strategy. And just to, I don't know, maybe also just to motivate a bit that I don't think science should shut up, but still think what are the most pertinent points to bring up right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Agreed. No, I think it's the role that everybody has that Elvira was referring to, that this that the scientist's role is there's just so much you can repeat. I don't know. The paper that Meyer-Hermann was mentioning, I think, was from March 2020, if I'm not mistaken. So we repeated this many times. So there's a certain so there seems to be politicians can be reached, but in this respect. But there are always certainly new challenges. So we are not planning to stop. I can tell you that. All right. So Alex just informed me is in the public room, in the public hall. The closing remarks at 7:05. I hope I see you there. If not, thanks again for spending the evening hours on a Thursday night with all of us. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining. Bye-bye.